episode of Home Sweet Home. My name is Rod McCall.
And my name is Bryce Runge. Welcome back, Rod.
Oh, well, yeah, I know we do these regularly and frequently, but I always have fun getting together, chewing the fat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good thing we don't tape our off-screen or our warm-up session.
Our warm-up therapy session between Counselor Rod McCall and his patient, Bryce Runge.
Yeah. I think that's some of the most fun is the stuff we talk about that doesn't make the edit. They winds up on the editing floor,
right? Or the
film room floor, whatever you call that.
You know what? We ought to create a bloopers reel.
Maybe.
You remember the old NFL bloopers reel?
Oh yeah,
those were so funny.
Oh, weren't they?
I don't know if they still do those.
I have no idea.
I don't know.
We would have to make sure that it's PG friendly.
Yeah. Well, they were then, but I don't know now.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking about our outtakes.
Oh, our outtakes. Yeah, most of them wouldn't make the cut.
It'd be a very
because of you.
Oh, really? Okay, there's a lot of truth maybe to that.
Oh, just kidding. Hey, going through some of the stuff that we were going to talk about, when we plan, Rod, here's a little backstory on our podcast. Rod does, I would say 99% of the, what do you call it? Our topics, gathering information on our topics, puts our talk track together, if you will. There's a lot of stuff that we do off the, just shoot from the hip. And that's, I think, why we work so well together.
Well, yeah, you can do the technical stuff, which I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I don't know everything, but at least we're able to get it out there and people can listen, right? So, hey, we're winning.
Yeah, we got over 2,000 downloads, baby.
I saw that. That's pretty cool.
Who would have thought when we started this 18 months ago?
Is that, it meant 18 months already?
Something like that.
Dang. Time flies.
When you're having fun.
I'm not advocating or plugging Facebook, but I hate Facebook on certain days. Braddox and I were able to go to Baltimore a couple weeks ago, and his favorite team is the Ravens. Mm-hmm. And we had such a great time. And when we got home on a Monday. We left Saturday early morning, got back on a Monday night. I struggled that week. Big time. And I don't know what I was going through, or I'm still going through it. But I've always kind of been weird, returning from a vacation or returning from.
Okay, when you said weird, I was going a lot of places.
Oh, well, like I don't know, I couldn't figure out the word, but like I don't know if it's an emotional thing or I don't know. Ever since a kid, we'd go to Illinois and we'd come home. Because most of our family is in Illinois, and I just hated leaving. And I always got so sad and down, like going back home. And that week we got back, I was just feeling really down. We had a great time. A great time, despite the altercation after the game. But I'm not going to go into that. On Tuesday morning. And on Wednesday morning, Facebook decided to remind me 10 years ago of, Braddox when he was 2.
Okay, yeah.
And it made me so sad for some reason. I'm just like, why are you being so sad right now, right? Why? And then it did it again. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and I know you and I have been talking, off film here about, me trying to slow down and enjoy and like eliminate hurry. Mm-hmm. And those pictures reminded me of how fast it goes. And he's already 13 and Briar's 3. The baby's going to be 2 soon. It's like, it goes by so fast, and then like you're in such a hurry, and then you turn around and like, wow. And Facebook did a good job reminded me of that. And then I thought of you. And then I thought of your situation with Eric.
Oh.
Which brings me to the topic today of how do you heal after a loss?
Okay.
And so there's an article It's on Psychology Today, and it talks about how do you know, what prevents you from healing from a loss. And I'm grateful for, you know, my experience with the Hope Squad the last 3 years at the school district and learning about suicide prevention. And one thing that I really taught, you know, the kids on and learned myself was that grief, that circle of grief. And it helped me immensely with Suzanne and with her mom passing last November. And I've always told her, I said, that you have a right to grieve, and you're going to go through various stages of grief, and you have a right to go through that. And no one could tell you when to heal or whatever, right? And you have a right to cry. You have a right to miss your mom. It's that we've talked about this in the past, I believe, the Mourner's Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
And you can Google it, you know, if you're listening, you could Google a Mourner's Bill of Rights. And, you know, again, it got me thinking of you, and I wanted you to talk about that because you lost Eric
11 years ago.
11 years ago, and you just recently celebrated his Angel Day, right?
Yeah. October 21st, 2011 was the day that Eric was murdered by his mother. I agree with you. Loss comes in many different ways. You and I both suffered the loss of our marriage, loss of jobs. People, you know, you can lose a pet, you can lose parents, moving, you can lose friends when you move, change jobs and you lose your work friends. I have a guy that work with, and he's ready to retire. But yet he goes, you know, I don't want to retire because I'm going to miss all of y'all. I like the people I work with. And when I retire, what am I going to have? So loss comes in many different ways. So it's not just, you know, the death of a family member. But for me, it was really, really hard because it came suddenly, no preparation. I mean, I'm downstairs at the front door knocking, and, you know, when he is shot. And it has taken most every day of the last 11 years to help me figure out how to process. Because you're right, the Bill of Rights, you have a right to mourn. And you go through the various stages of mourning, the stages of loss, death, grief, whatever you want to call that.
Right.
And I will say that it has, I think I've done them more than once, each one. And that is, I mean, you know, sometimes they talk about it being an order. I will say that the hardest one for me was the anger. Because I got so wrapped up in that. I mean, yes, there was the denial. That was hard. Well, he'll just, you know, this was an illusion. Even though for his 8th birthday, we buried him. That, you know, it was kind of like, well, maybe that was just a nightmare. I bargained with God.
Yeah.
And that was, well, that went nowhere. Serious depression.
Right.
Where I was lucky to have, at that time, a lot of folks from the divorce group who made sure that I was not alone, constantly coming over. If not every day, somebody, I mean, I was getting phone calls, text messages every day from different people, but then some folks would come over and say, hey, we're going to sit and we're going to watch TV or watch a sporting event, or, hey, we're coming to pick you up, we're going out to lunch. Or, hey, we're going to meet you for lunch, so get your butt out of the house and meet us, to help me fight the depression. Because it was as dark and as heavy as one could imagine. I mean, and it came in so many different forms, and it came in waves. I mean, I saw a therapist. I was seeing her weekly, trying to wrap my head through this. And I still have issues with depression related to Eric's death. I finally came to accept it. I guess about the time I wrote my book, For the Love of Eric.
For the Love of Eric, yeah.
But the one that I struggle with the most, though, is the anger.
Yeah.
Angry at myself, angry at her, angry at the world.
Right.
And so, yeah, this article spoke volumes to me, simply because, again, dealing with loss. I mean, I'm when I talk to kids at school, I don't say that, much about Eric being killed. Occasionally there'll be a kid, that'll be going through something, and I will mention, my son died when he was a little boy. And I don't really go through all that background story. But I do that to kind of help share in their grief and their processing. But yeah, for me, it has been the anger.
The anger. Well, and I know you pretty much went through the 5 stages. You just listed them off and shared how you experienced that. And so if you're listening, you don't understand, or you've never heard of the 5 stages of grief, you've got denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And like you mentioned just a second ago, Rod, is that there's no order, there's no process. It's you may bounce back and forth, and there's no set limit, there's no time limit on it either. And so you mentioned anger, and with the article, it's what prevents you from healing from loss, and it sounds like anger was a barrier, right? As a major prevention, and rightfully so, right?
Yeah, it took again, God bless my therapist. She it's taken years. I mean, I can deal with it. I didn't this year I only fell apart once, and that was right about the moment that it actually happened.
Okay.
And what was really neat this year, and again, divine intervention. I mean, God works in really mysterious and very interesting ways to let you know that there is a God, and that despite it all, He really does care. Anyway, the reason why I say that, I had a student who the day before was commenting. Anyway, through some discussions, found out that the reason why she failed the year before was because she had 3 close family members die in the span of 3.5 months. And so she missed almost the entire second semester of school last year. So at that point, I mentioned to her, I said, well, I didn't have 3, but I did lose, I said, I lost Eric, and I said his anniversary is coming up. And anyway, so the very next day, she walks up and she hands me this handmade booklet that says things to consider. And in there, she wrote me a nice little note.
Yeah. And
then she proceeds to have, on all the other pages, quotes from various people, from Hollywood to sports to philosophers, of just things to consider. And yet, what got me, not only did she make this, and it's colorful, and it's a young lady, so it's got good handwriting, and
it's legible.
Yeah, very much so. But she brought it to me at about 11:25.
Mm.
And that's when Eric died.
Are you serious?
It was at 11:25. And she came to me and she said, Mr. McCall, I wanted to give you this. She said, I know I will see you on Monday in class, but I felt that you needed this today, not on Monday.
Wow. And she had no idea.
She had no idea.
No.
And so I thanked her and all that. And then she leaves and I have a co-teacher that class. And I looked at him and I says, I'll be right back. I need to use the restroom.
Yeah.
I go in the bathroom and I just bawl like a baby. And again, it was reliving that moment.
Right.
But also the compassion that was shared with me from this young person. And at the exact time says that was for me, maybe it wasn't, but for me, it was like it was a message from God. It was a message from Eric that said, hey, it meant the world.
Yeah.
But over the last 11 years, I have found ways to address the pain, to deal with the depression. I mean, again, the book helped immensely. I cannot stress how much that has been beneficial. And basically all it was a publication of my journal writings.
Yeah.
Because I journaled so much during the divorce and after, after Eric's death. And so I think that helped a lot because, grief hits you in so many different ways.
Yeah. Well, and I am going to throw it out there. I am plugging it because I know we just talked about it. But if you haven't picked up a copy of Rod's book, For the Love of Eric, please do so. Please do so.
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. Everything's on Amazon.
No kidding. Don't get me started there. But anyway, so yeah, it's tough. And, everybody goes through it differently. It takes different time for, but I will say that this year number 11 was the hardest, the easiest of the 11 years.
Oh, okay.
And because it does, different people, I have family that have lost people extremely close to them. And I think that it's callous to say that you get over it.
Right.
For me, I've learned how to live with it, knowing that, okay, Eric will be 19 or will have turned 19 on Halloween. He should have graduated high school last year. And maybe he'd be in college this year. Maybe he'd be at KU.
Yeah, I was just about to say, he'd be at KU.
Maybe living with his Aunt Teresa. But these are the kinds of things that sometimes make me, still to this day, make me angry. The couldas, the wouldas, the should have been.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, what does this lady say about stuff like that?
Well, I ask you, is grief a good, healthy thing? Is it how we transition?
I think in moderation.
Yeah.
I think you have to go through it, but I think it's easy to get stuck in it, at which point I think then it becomes unhealthy.
Right.
But I think, and again, a lot depends on what kind of loss you have, what kind of support system you have.
Right.
I mean, I had a magnificent support system, which you believe, you were part of that support system, especially helping transition back into teaching and learning to love that again.
Right. Well, you mentioned, there were a lot of people in your corner, and there are some people that don't have people in their corner. Right,
No.
unfortunately, but I mentioned those relationships. We talk about a lot about relationships, right, and how our relationships are going to help us at least contribute to us getting out of that dark place and sharing. Would you say that sharing our grief is a good thing? Sharing with others is a good thing. It helps us get out of that isolation and loneliness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you had mentioned it was people had to pretty much beat down your door to drag your butt out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those are just exceptional friends you have in your life because they understood that I think they understood your boundaries, but also understood no, you're coming out because you need some vitamin D. You need to come out of the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, when you share those stories, I just think about those family and friends members just showing up and being the light in your life in such a dark time. And I just, I'm grateful for the people that you have in your life, and I'm grateful to be a part of your life. And I know, just looking across the table from you, how hard it is for you. And it's, I'm not going to lie, it's hard for me to sit here and listen to it because, I have Braddocks. I started off this, Facebook reminds me, and, I'm also reminded of you and what you've gone through.
Well, it's, like I say, everybody suffers loss. And I think you suffer loss because you are invested. I think maybe there's a better way to say that is the more invested you are in that which you lose, then maybe the harder it is. I mean, okay, you crash your car, you wreck your car, you get a new car.
Right.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry, I lost my vehicle. That was my first, or, oh, I love that vehicle. I, have these memories. We attach something to it. And I think the greater the attachment, the harder that loss might be. But I don't know, I understand when people say that they get, I don't think they say they get stuck, but listening to them when they, through what they say or do, illustrates that maybe they are stuck. And when I have friends or family, especially those that are outside of the Dallas area, where I can't get to them, I feel like I want to do more to help you because I do understand and I can relate. Because I think all of us can relate to loss of some sort.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you have that beloved pet, that that puppy or that cat or whatever it is that you've had since you were little. I mean, again, on Facebook, I see a lot of people post, when their pet passes away.
To many, pets are like their kids or family, right?
Well, again, it's that attachment.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think you kind of come into issues related to loss.
Yeah. It's I mean, the reality too is also that people are so attached to things that they go through those circles, that they go through the circle of grief over the loss. Some even go as far as, sports teams, they lose and they're that intense. But that's not really our focus today. I'm just kind of pointing that out. It's not all about the things that we accumulate as we sit around in our podcast studio here, and I've rediscovered a childhood. What would you call that? Passion. I will say that I have some cards in here. One is worth $3,700. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. You have to check your pockets before you leave.
Dang it.
Anyways, back to this article. It's a good read about what prevents you from healing from a loss. And so some of the key points that this doctor addresses is, I don't even know how to say her last name, Dr. Bragard. Sounds good. That most bereaved people enter a healing phase after around 6 months of intense grief on average? So basically, at 6 month mark, you start to enter that healing.
Well, I will say Eric died at the end of October, and I started kind of coming out at about March, looking for work, knowing I needed to get a job. So that would have been November, December, January, February, March. So 5 months. So right in there, I was feeling well enough to start kind of processing,
right?
Getting out of the quicksand of depression, and starting to deal with that. So yeah.
I reflect back on this past year with Suzanne and the loss of her mom. I would say somewhere around there. Again, to this day, we may be driving out to her parents, and she may just start crying. I miss my mom.
Yeah.
Right.
Well.
And guess what? I know you do, and I do too. And she'll try and apologize. You don't need to apologize.
No.
Stop apologizing. You have the right to miss your mom. She was your best friend. She was your mentor. Yeah. She was your hero. Right? You want to cry? Cry. Let's going back to sharing your grief. But I would say, around that mark is when, not out of the woods.
No.
But the process the starting the process of healing. Yeah. Around that mark. So you say that's about.
Yeah. Because it's. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. Again, using my experience only.
Yeah.
But that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
To say 5 to 6 months.
Yeah. Another key point she addresses is that around 10 to 20% of people experience complicated, intense, and disabling grief for significantly longer than the average of 6 months.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
makes me wonder what she's kind of referencing here. I could see if it was maybe related to suicide, for example, where you're a parent and your child dies. I had a student that passed away, a former student. He graduated, but he had taken his own life, and we had that. His funeral literally was Monday before the world shut down on Wednesday with COVID.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for so many of his friends, my former students, and that I was glad I was invited, honored to be invited, went, and then even 1 year later, a bunch of them got together and met at the cemetery, and they had invited me to come out. All those kids were a special group of kids that I got to be close with, and it was really neat, and like I said, quite an honor. But I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine that might be something complicated.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's a good article, and she points out a couple things. But yeah, basically, what's your stage, something that you encountered with your grief, the circle of grief with anger, was preventing you from, was a barrier preventing you from healing. What did you do to overcome that anger? Oh, how do you I know you just pointed out, like, I still get angry, right? Which you have the right to do that, absolutely. But what helped you to start move past that anger?
I think for me, it started with trying to recognize what I was angry with, who I was angry at, and diving into exploring those issues And as I explored the issues of the who I was angry with and why I was angry with them, and that took a lot of therapy with my therapist. And we tried a variety of strategies that really had me dive deep into exploring what, from, once we actually, it turns out it was his mother. Yeah. Eric's mother was the focal point of my anger.
Yeah.
And it exploded out of that. And so we explored over a couple of years different ways to dive into all of that. Yeah. And so again, I am very grateful for the therapist and her work. I mean, family was great. Their undying support was instrumental. The friends and that was very helpful. The prayers, again, we can argue the value of religion, but for me, absolutely, that played a huge part. Right. But to pinpoint it on something specific and direct, it was the various strategies that my therapist walked me through to address that anger. Yeah. From the journaling that I mentioned, pulled out an empty chair, and she said, my therapist says, okay, Eric's mother's in that chair. What do you want to say? And we dove into that. Wow. We did another one it's called EMDR. I don't remember what it stands for, but it is it's a meditative device developed for the military, especially PTSD trauma within the military. And so she was trained in that. And so we walked through that, and that helped immensely. Yeah. Helping me kind of, again, unwrap the issues. Yeah. And so I'm very grateful to her for that. Yeah. So, but again, I think that part of that goes back to, though, Eric was my kid. Yeah. And, for a large portion, I don't know how we want to phrase this differently. He represented a large part of my why for every day getting up. And to have that disappear, I mean, he was why we went through the child custody stuff that we did. Right. Why, all the court battles weren't over the possessions of the stuff of divorce. Right. It was getting to spend time. Yeah. And that's all I wanted. I wanted time with Eric. And suddenly I was, a jury said, you can have 100% of your time with him. And then I never got it. Yeah. So it's, again, I think attachment, the more you're attached to something, there's a guy by the name of a therapist or researcher, doctor guy by the name of Bowlby, and he was big on attachment. And so, I think the more you're attached to something, the more you're going to miss it when it's gone. Yeah. Yeah. Again, those 5 stages: denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and anger. And I wanted to kind of just hang out there for just another second or two. I know we're kind of getting towards the end of our show. But I did a little research, and I thought it was interesting that researchers and mental health professionals agree that anger is a necessary stage of grief, and in fact encourage anger. It's important to truly feel the anger. It's thought that even though you might seem like you are in an endless cycle of anger, it will dissipate. Did you feel that?
at some point?
I did. I don't know that it,
Right.
it was, but maybe I don't feel as angry. I mean, the only time I get angry is when I start to drive.
And that is true. But anyways, it goes on to say, and the more you truly feel the anger, the more quickly it will dissipate and the more quickly you will heal. It's not healthy to suppress your feelings of anger because it's a natural response and perhaps arguably a necessary one.
Okay, well, we did. We went into exploring and diving into why was there anger.
Right.
So, and again, once I felt better from the anger, my depression lessened quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You mentioned early on, things, pets, car, life, grief can be caused by situations, relationships, or even substance abuse. The children may grieve through divorce, grief, a wife grieving the loss of a husband. Teenager might grieve ending of a relationship. You see that a lot in high school.
Yeah.
The relationships that last 2 weeks, 3 days, and 48 seconds. Or you receive terminal medical news and grieving your pending death. So there's a lot of things that lead to grief. And again, if you're grieving and you don't know what you're experiencing, Rod is a testament to seeking therapy and how that played a pivotal role in your healing.
Oh,
and it's okay to see a therapist. Google is a wonderful thing. You Google all of these things, and we've been giving you the 5 stages of grief. Just something that you need to know is that if you're grieving right now, you have the right to grieve. You have the right to experience anger, denial. Go ahead and bargain. Go ahead. You're going to go through depression, and then you're going to get to a point of acceptance. And like you said, Eric's always going to be there. It's not. Not what I'm sure I'm trying to say. It's you haven't forgot clearly. You've learned how to move on, but you're also you're passionate about. You have the book Eric's For the Love of Eric, and now you have you're on a mission to do Eric's Place of Hope, and that is going to come to life here very soon. And you've already made a huge impact on people's lives through the divorce group and through our podcast, through your book. And I know that you're going to continue to do that. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, because I know it's not easy.
Well, it's what I do. It's part of my healing process, dealing with it, talking to people. And so I'm glad, this popped up and we were able to, even if we can't pronounce the lady's name, be able to explore a little bit into, the issues.
Right.
Because you're right. We go through grief. We suffer loss of, from so many different ways. And you're right, dealing with teenagers, I see it a lot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyways, this was actually enjoyable. It wasn't sad or depressing or anything like that. It might be. So
yeah,
this turned out pretty good.
Well, good. I'm glad, because I kind of was leading this one today, so that's a good. I didn't fail. But anyways, again, Rod, thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
With not only me, our 2,000 plus downloads people. Who knows? We'll call them people. They're all people. We love y'all. And Eric, we love you. Rod, we love you. Thank you for sharing. We're going to close this one out.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, buddy. I'm Bryce.
I'm Rod.
Until next time.